This is going to be an interesting conversation because most of the people that I have on the podcast, they're like Korean diaspora of other countries, right? So like I'm Korean American, but like I'll have somebody on that's from Australia or that's from Germany, from France, or they're doing like research in specific industry areas.
Yeah.
But like I don't really view them as that similar to myself. Like Korean American,
Sure.
I haven't really like interviewed that many Korean Americans. The one person is this guy Jun, and he's like documentary filmmaker dude. But you guys are like same age range as myself, and I would say in terms of personal experiences, even though I am like very American, I would say I can like resonate with you guys more on a few topics. So to start, like, can you introduce yourself, but maybe as like a high level starting point, how old you are and like what you're doing here in Korea right now, because you're pretty temporary. Both of you guys are, but you especially so.
Let me tie that into what you asked. I'm Bryan. I'm 27, and I grew up in California. I went there when I was 6, maybe 5. I've lived on the West Coast, the East Coast, the South, and the Midwest. I'm here because I'm engaged to a Korean international woman, and she's here until she basically immigrates to get married with me. We met in New York. I met also in New York, and our mutual is also we met in New York. And so we're here. Well, I'm here very temporarily. I'm leaving tomorrow, and I've only since I was 6. I've only come to Korea at most for a month at a time. So I've never lived in Korea. I've never had a profession in Korea. So I would say I'm pretty like Americanized as well, minus the like recent implode of Korean interactions in New York.
Makes sense.
I'm Inho. I'm 25, 2 years younger than you are. I'm 25. I moved to America, to California to be specific, when I was 14, 15. I went there for high school, so I was international kid. And I am international kid. I consider myself Korean, not Korean American. And then for college, I went to New York to study sports management. And then I worked there for a few months, year. Then I'm back in Korea for a year, and I'm planning to go back to America late this year. And excited to be here.
And just real quick, you said this, but when was it that you moved? How old were you when
I
you
was
moved to
14, 15.
14,
so
15.
Ninth grade, yes.
Yeah.
So I finished my middle school here in Korea, and then I moved to Orange County.
And Bryan, you were 6 or so.
I always mix it up, but I finished first grade here. I finished first grade here. So I went to pre-K, kindergarten. Well, in Korea, I think you go to pre-K for 3 years. So I went to pre-K for 2 years, kindergarten and then first grade. And then I moved to the States when I was 2nd grade. But fun fact, you might not even know this. Because the Korean school year is February through December, and American school year is September through June, I only had 2.5 months of 2nd grade. So I wouldn't say I skipped a grade, but typically people, the Korean word for it is like kuro. They like go down a grade. Is that an English word? It's not. I didn't flunk, but like most Koreans,
they intentionally do that.
They intentionally
so that they're like ahead.
Correct. They repeat a grade, or they go down a grade. I ended up going normally, which made me feel like I skipped a grade. So I've only done 11 and 8 months of. 11 years and 2 months of like regular school. And
you're saying that people do the go down a grade when they move to like the
Correct. Like so let's say they finish first grade here, they would go back into first grade when they go back.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And this there's a question of like Koreanness that often comes up in some of the discussions that I have with people. I want you to do a cross evaluation of the other people. Like I'd like for you.
So smart.
So I guess both. Like you, on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being like if you were in conversation with like Korean people that have never been outside the States, like, could you just interact with them for like days, weeks on end, and they could never tell that you had spent time abroad, you know, that you just like fit into like society seamlessly. So like I want you to do the evaluation on Inho, like on a scale of 0 to 10, and then on me, and then on yourself. Okay. Don't give the rationale yet. I want it. Or actually no. I want Inho's response first because I don't want your response to influence Inho. So you go first on this response. Yeah.
So when I rate Bryan, I will say 9.
Really? That high?
Yes.
Wow, that's impressive.
he has no issue with like speaking and communicating in Korean.
Huh.
So actually, I do business with Bryan, and then we went to a Korean print shop, and then we had a like formal business meeting there, and then we talked over phone, and then we went there in person, and we talked over like for 1 hour, right? Yeah.
Across the board.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And then he knew like how to act, like
You know how to act.
how to shake hands,
Yeah.
like, and how to make eye contact with them, and how to like exchange business cards, all that.
Yeah.
So that's why I gave him 9.
Okay. I won't comment on that.
You give him 9. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So then what do you give yourself?
I mean,
10.
10. Yes.
Yeah. And what do you give me?
Ooh.
No, you're not gonna hurt my feelings. Don't worry. I don't speak Korean, so it's like it's not even possible for me to really like be in.
I would give you a 6.
What, a 6?
Yeah.
Well, why don't you give me like a 0? Or, I would say like a 0 or a 1.
Because there's something called 유교사상 in Korean, like how to act, like and how to treat elderly. And yeah,
You think that I mold myself to that?
I'm sure that you know like how to.
You're just being
respect
kind. With the
others.
6, you're just being kind, so I don't feel bad. This is the definition of a Korean person right here. Okay, that's awesome.
Well, now I'm going to seem like a bad person.
No.
Inho's a 10. Yeah, without a doubt. I think that people would know it. It's just based on his haircut. They would know that he's Korean. I would, and then I'll go me last.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm being real,
Yeah.
not to be a bad person.
Yeah.
Tiger hair is a 0. Like
Really?
In language.
Language?
In manners, and but I think his practical question, maybe I'm being boring. He meant how long could he go? Could any of us go with the other person not asking? Oh, but by the way, like, are you American? Like, that's a very commonly asked thing in Korea because we tend to stand out. I would say even you. I think if we spent, according to his question, maybe like I'm too imaginatory. If we go days, years, like decades, I think at some point knowing like your slightly more small talk ability and like your openness and like maybe a little bit more giggly and like you're okay with like people like jabbing at you. Maybe you act differently with us, but I think it's not improbable that someone would ask, "Hey, have you like been in the States for some time?" So I would even give you a 10. I would say like maybe if anything you are like an 8. I would say for me, if like Tiger's task was you need to, if you get caught that you're American, you die. then maybe I'll go like, for me, like 6 or 7. But I think realistically, if I'm not like purposefully oppressing myself, am I allowed to say oppressing myself?
Yeah.
I would say I'm like a 4. And let me like quickly explain. I'm not trying to be humble. I'm not a very humble person. My Korean is good. I would say my Korean's good. And recently, like dating this person, it's gotten better. But there's definitely like words or phrases that feel off sometimes if you talk to me long enough. And secondly, like just based on looks alone, I would say like there's clearly like the way that I dress or whatever. Again, if the task is not to hide, I don't think I can go very far.
Yeah, because I was gonna give you like 8.5, and then I was gonna give you maybe like a 6 or 7.
At best.
Right? Because I feel like even when I hear you speak Korean, even though it's like flawless, I feel like I can still feel some of your American personality like seeping out
100%.
when you engage with people.
100%.
For you, if you're around a Korean group of friends like for a very, very long time, like they're Korean, they haven't spent time abroad, right? Like maybe you don't spend time with those types of people that often, but do you feel ever like some tension, like internally, of like you want to express more of your like American side?
I will say yes,
Yeah.
especially when I was in Kundae, like the military experience, because like military is all about the ranks, like how long you spent in military and how you serve, like how long you served in military, all that. So there's hierarchy and there's like Koreanism in military. I'm pretty sure it's different experience in the American army So yes, when I was in army, especially when I was in the army, because all the Koreans want the hierarchy. I feel like they prefer hierarchy over parallelism, over like with others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like purely meritocratic.
Yes.
Everybody's equal. It's just like what you bring to the table, kind of a dynamic. Yeah.
So in terms of that, yes.
But it's rare or like infrequent, right? When that happens, would you say?
I believe myself. Yes, rare. But when I actually talk to my Korean friends who's never been to America or like abroad, they said they feel that tension, pretty often. So I guess it depends on how you look at and how I evaluate myself. Between how I evaluate myself and how others evaluate me.
That makes sense. And so for both of you guys, you spent time in the U.S., different time periods, but so for you, I feel like my perception of you has changed with like each interaction.
Really?
Because originally when like Yun was telling me about you, right? She was like, oh, he's Korean American like you. And like, I think like you is just like very American personality, right? But then, and so I assumed like maybe you're like second or third generation Korean American and you hadn't like spent that much time in Korea, but maybe you had family and you come back. But then I learned that you like spent formative years, like,
correct.
0 through 6 is like, that's a lot to absorb at a very young age. And I feel like that leaves an imprint on you.
It's a fifth of my life.
But then, then again, like, I feel like I do know other people that have spent their younger years here and then moved to the States, and they're not maybe as Korean as you in terms of like their fluency and the comfortability. Like they feel like much more like SoCal Korean Americans than they do at all like Koreans. Like for you in terms of what you attribute to the degree to which you are Korean, like what I guess like explain it to me.
Great
is it idiosyncratic or is it environmental or is it a combination?
I think it's changed over time, and you guys have met me at the most Korean I've ever been, right? And so, like, I frankly met Tyler like 2 weeks ago. But even then, and I think we've like hung out enough where we can identify each other. Right now, like I'm in Korea. The friend group that we're now collectively part of is a relatively pretty Korean. Like there's Koreans in the group, so we have to interact in a rather Korean fashion. So I think underlyingly there's a Koreanness to our interaction, and not to like inflate myself, but I think I'm pretty adaptive. So if you guys saw me in a non-Korean environment, I would say then you'd think of me differently, or you're like, oh, he's very American. So I think the environment matters. Secondly, again, not to like keep banging on this, I am dating a Korean person, and so culturally, I guess like kind of like high conservative take. I think people tend to follow the like woman's culture. That's like a known thing within, I would say, like interracial or like multicultural families, where typically like the children are raised in the like mother's way. And so in the same way, I think the like husbands probably follow the wife method. And I think in my time with Claire, like I've probably become a bit more Koreanized and like putting on sunscreen or like whatever. and I think all those things like embed within that. But I think within my like 27, 28 years of lifetime, when I first came, obviously very Korean, whatever. And then I think from 6 to probably like 18, I probably lived that Southern Californian American vibe. I wouldn't say that's like a white American vibe. It's more of like a very specific culture within that, because the Southern Californian Korean culture has been like cultivating for some time. So that is kind of a thing. And then from 18 to 21 or 22, I had a very unique experience. So I went to like a very no-name Southern Caucasian school. 90% of the school is white. I was like one of 3 Koreans in the entire school.
You're talking about high school or university?
University. And the university is like 94% fraternity life participation rate. 6th oldest school in the country, named after like Robert E. Lee. Very, very Southern school. And so I think within there, I became even more Americanized, but not even Southern Californian Korean Americanized, just like pure Americanized. And because I'm like such an adaptive person, especially when it comes to language, I think like I started picking up like the Southern drawl and like Southern hospitality as a culture, and like understanding like how Alabama's different from Kentucky and Kentucky's from Florida, and all these things become like a daily part of life. And then on top of that, back at home, 12 hours of my day was with my family, where I only spoke Korean. And my parents are obviously pretty Korean people. But in college, you're 24/7 with said people in that Southern environment. So I think that 4 years had more of an influence to me than the other 12 years or whatever. And then, really quickly, from 21 to 24, I was in Chicago. But then COVID hit. So I went back and forth and I did all these like nomadic things, and I spent a lot of time with my family again. And so I probably went back to being like the Southern Californian. And then from 24 to 27, I was in New York. And a lot of my social life there, aside from my like fraternity friends that happened to be in New York, was at this Korean church. But the Korean church wasn't a Korean American church. I was part of the like Korean ministry. And I did that because it seemed more fun. And that probably made me even more Korean, because these people are like the epitome of Koreanness. Like a lot of these people come from Korea like yesterday, and they're all speaking Korean. And they're very like this. And the last like cherry on top is, until I was 24, the only Korean experience I had was with my family. And that's very limiting, because there's like hierarchy, but it's like a love-based hierarchy. Types of conversations you can have with them is very limited. And I never really had peer-to-peer interaction in Korean.
But you did go to a Korean church when you were younger, right?
I did.
Like through middle school?
Through high school.
Through high school? Okay.
But it was very Korean American.
Okay.
And even the like DNA of the church was very like diaspora, and like my pastor was a 1.5 gen Brazilian or Korean Brazilian. It wasn't very like, like this.
Yeah.
It was very like relatively parallel. A lot of the adults spoke English.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't Korean.
That's why. So when we first met, or maybe like when we met at church the other day, right? Like you bowed to me, right? I don't know if that was like a joking. Because I was like, man, that is so weird for me. You know, because like if you're a Korean American, why are you doing that? But okay, that makes sense. All right, and then I think one of the things that kind of surprises me is sometimes I'll talk to people who have spent like many years in the States, and their background is like born and raised in Korea, and their English is like terrible, you know? And like, not to be mean, but like, it's just surprising. Like, you spent 7 years in the States and you don't feel comfortable speaking in English. Your experience when you first moved to like SoCal area, explain to me like your experience in the States. Like when you first got there, the friends that you chose to make, either deliberately or just because of like the culture and environment that you were in.
Sure. My experience was pretty opposite to Bryan's. I moved to California when I was 14, 15, so my English level wasn't that good. So I went to high school anyway. So the first friends I met was Korean. Like first friend group I met at high school was Korean. But in my graduating class, I was the only Korean international kid in the graduating class.
Wow.
And then I played baseball. Yeah. And then there are only few Asians in the team. Even though baseball is like one of the top sports in Korea, they don't really play in Korea. They just watch baseball. And the concept of baseball in Korea is it's only open for just few who's like who are very selected and who are like born and raised in the baseball loving family community. Whereas in America, everyone plays the sports love to. Yes. Yeah. And then I chose to play baseball, and then the background there, the fact that I was only Korean in the team. Yeah. And then Korean international kid in the graduating class. So that's why I was very Americanized till now, maybe. But when I went to college, I joined like Korean international group, and then I went to church that Bryan went to. So that's where I opened up my eyes to be more Korean Americanized rather than being just so American.
So would you say the height of your like Americanness was more so like your late high school years?
Yes, my senior year. And then I went to Kundae right after my freshman year. So that's why I became more Korean, even though I used to be more Korean American in my 18, 19.
And why did you move to the States in the first place? Like, is that always something your parents wanted you guys to get a better education?
So my parents didn't really like the Korean education system. So they sent me to Christian school in Pohang, which is the like southern city in Korea. Close to Daegu area.
Is that where the military base is, or is that somewhere?
That's where 해병대, the Marine Corps headquarters is. So I went there for international education, and then as soon as I finished my ninth grade, middle of ninth grade, I decided to move to California to study as an international kid. That's where that's when my all Americanness started. Yeah, so that's why I went to the school in California, and then I loved being there actually. Believe it or not, I got the award when I graduated from high school. I got the Lion Award, which was just our high school mascot was Lion.
Wow.
And then the Lion Award is given to someone who who's very high, like very good with the school spirits, all that.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Which typically Koreans
yes.
Like spirit-based awards. Yeah.
I participated in the school rally, pet rally, and I was homecoming prince. I never made the king. I was pretty involved in school activities. I was part of the link crew, which was the freshman and senior the group.
Yeah.
I was one of the leaders. And then whenever there was like any international kids interested in my high school, I was the one who took them and then showed them around school. So I was pretty involved.
One thing that I also want to talk about is, so me and Inho, we're both coincidentally RAs during college, like residential advisors. And after speaking to, for the past, like, especially 6 months, one caveat I do want to say is I think him and I, especially our families, are similar in the sense that we're culturally American, like the families are.
Really?
And
Even Ino's family?
even not in the sense of like they're American by any means. And like Ino's family, besides his sister, they don't like live in the States, and my family, besides my immediate family, well, some of them do. But I'm talking more about like, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm speaking on behalf of your family. Both our families, they don't like over care for us. For example, like they're okay with us like kind of doing our thing. And then secondly, I think based on DNA or whatever, it seems like both of us are very not only like outspoken, but we're very like high spirited, and we do, for lack of better words, like extroverted things.
Yeah.
And that just seems to be within our own nature, which I think allows us to be better immersers of like American culture.
Yeah.
Whereas other, not just Koreans, but people in general, when they immigrate, they keep to themselves and they don't like assimilating.
Yes.
And I think that's a personality thing rather than maybe more than like a timing thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I do think there's probably a cultural layer as well, where I wonder if they did some sort of like sociological study where they tracked everybody that was moving from Korea to the States on a level of introversion versus extroversionness. Yes. The extroverted people are definitely going to assimilate a lot better, right? And both of you guys would characterize yourself as quite extroverted.
And then the reason why I chose sports management as my major was because of my parents, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. Really? What do you mean? Explain.
So I love sports.
I feel like that would never be something that Korean parents would tell their kids to
Yeah, that's what I was going to
Yeah, bottom of the list.
So when you go to American colleges, you will see a lot of Koreans would major in biology, maybe finance,
yes.
econ,
law,
comp-sci, all that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thankful that I chose sports management. I love it. I love being sports management student. And actually, there are a lot of Korean students coming in recently. But when I actually chose to major in sports management, there were not many Korean community working in the sports industry. I feel like the Koreans thought that sports is only reserved for small percentage of the population in America, which is true, I guess, but not as much as in Korea. No. Korea is very tiny with the sports market. But my parents told me that it's gonna be the only time that you can actually study about the sports.
Wow.
And do more do what I like. And then the reason why Korean parents do not like sports management is that it's not really a lucrative major compared to finance or maybe biology and doing MD afterwards. So it was quite challenging for me, but still my parents loved my choice being a sports management major. And then I graduated with sports management major, even though a lot of my friends actually changed their major to econ, finance during their sophomore year or junior year, but I decided to stay in the sports management program.
and like sports and the influence that it had on your life in general, like that's something that came from your family's background, or that's originated just from you and your own interest, and then you pursued that in your early years and then through high school?
My family is a baseball addict. Like they love being in the baseball stadium.
I feel like that fits your personality so well, just because it's like statistics and like I don't know, like I feel like baseball, like not to be like a pejorative or like a stigma around it, but like the people that are really really into baseball, they tend to have like a very analytical, almost more like nerdy-ish kind of side to them, right? And I feel like that kind of fits your personality to some extent. Do you disagree?
I mean, I want to disagree.
No, you should. You should. What do you mean? You should disagree. Please tell me.
No. What I'm saying is, I really want to
not be
disagree
that
with your points that I look like, nerdy-ish.
Well, I would say like even for myself, I'm kind of nerdy. I'm not
nerdy.
Compared to other sports, baseball is more. It's more based on statistics / analytics.
Yes.
I heard it's easier to do analytics on baseball compared to like basketball or football.
Right.
Because it's more, when batter shows up to batter's box, it's pretty easy to analyze what he's gonna hit or what he's gonna miss, and what pitch the pitcher is gonna throw, all that. So, speaking of that, yes, but. The negative connotation of the term nerdy. So that's why.
Is it negative? I mean, I guess it depends. Like Stanford was their nickname was like Nerd Nation, and like a lot of people took pride in that. And like I had a sweatshirt that would say like Nerd Nation on it, And I think a lot of my friends tend to have that. But I guess if you're talking about like a stereotypical American culture, it's like usually the way you picture it is like you've got like the high school, he's like a bully, and then he's like picking on the nerd, and the nerd has a very like distinct kind of like look or attributes, right? So in that sense, I feel like it's a negative.
Yes.
But again, I really think it's the parental culture really affects your desire to assimilate or not. And not saying like the parents are like don't assimilate, but I know you talked about like there's people that lived in the United States for 7 years and they can't carry a conversation.
Right.
I know people that have lived in the United States for 20 years and they can't carry a conversation. And I think it's because they go to, not it's their fault, but they go to America, they hang out with Koreans.
Yeah.
They go to a Korean church.
Yeah.
They end up working in a Korean workplace. And then they have this like desire. This is a whole different topic, but they now have this like desire of like, I want to go back. I want to go back to Korea. Korea is my home, even though they've been there for a very long time. And so, of course, if you don't interact with like white Americans or black Americans or Latin Americans or whatever, you're going to be culturally in this hole and not be able to speak the language.
Yeah, well, I feel like maybe I'm to be critical of myself, of my experience in Korea, is like I'm kind of doing that in reverse, right? It's like what I've kind of done is like created a group of friends or like some sort of like community that's just like English speakers everywhere, so I never am gonna need to like learn Korean or like be put in like a really Korean context to where I'm forced to absorb the culture in like its most raw form, but who knows? Maybe things will change over the next like.
Is there a reason for that?
I think that language is such an important part of like who I am, of like being able to articulate myself well, and because I can do that in English effectively, you have to like humble yourself and go through just like a period of like a few months where you're just stumbling over Korean words,
of course.
And it's also like an ego hit, I think. And I think I'm not like, because I'm doing Cambridge stuff like basically full time, is like it's like my entire life. I'm like trying to put as much time and energy into it. Is like that's always going to be second priority, and I'm never going to be able to get over the hump from a learning curve perspective, where I feel like it's not just painful, but it's also like a little bit fun because I have this foundation. That's fair. I guess that's the best way I could put it. Yeah. In terms of like how you guys met in New York, like the original reason why I thought we would do this podcast is because like one of the things that I hope the K-Bridge ecosystem or platform can be used for is if somebody's working on a cool project or somebody's like starting a company, and I think that it should be more widely known. You can kind of like, share that across the Korean diaspora and like help each other with their projects. And so you guys had like started a whole board game. Like we haven't even touched on this piece of it, right? You guys decided to start your own board game. You literally like have printouts and like have instructions and I did a pilot of it with Jun, and I unfortunately lost. I'm bitter about that. But like, how did that come about?
Yes. Okay. I think we started at how we met.
Yeah. Please.
What a cringy question. I actually, unless you remember, I don't remember how we exactly met, but I would say, oh, you do.
So, we actually met in church, and then our friend group is originated from church. So we actually kind of refrained to go to like clubs or like, parties with alcohol. So we decided to look for alternatives, and there are two alternatives to that. First one was Room Escape. And the second was board game cafe in Korea.
Yeah.
There are a lot of board game cafes where you spend like $5 for like coffee, and then you get to play a board game as much as you want. It's a pretty nice system. And then we went there and we played like 3-4 games. Yeah. And then on our way out, I was like, I think we can make board game based on New York City. So that's when we started the business.
Was this like basically the first or second time you guys had met? Is this happening?
No.
This was a little bit into after. Okay.
I think it's been 2 years since I met you, right?
Yes.
2 years.
Sorry, I was thinking more about how do you meet?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Initially, how you met, like even before the board game stuff. Like what?
I don't recall.
Really? You remember?
I kind of remember. So I don't remember the literally exact moment that I met, but the church is relatively big. So the entire church is like, I'd say 12, maybe 1,000, a little bit more. The college group that he was part of, he still is part of, is like 150, maybe 200, probably 150. I was part of the young adults group, probably like 600. But then because, this is actually kind of relatable. So because Koreans have the mandatory military service, the tail end of young adult groups in Korean churches is actually quite old. Especially when I first went, that was 3 years ago, so I would have been 24. So a lot of 23, 24-year-olds are still in college if they're men because they lack a year and a half or 2 years. And so I was still at the tail end, and when I entered, I was super young even for that group, and it was right after COVID, so a lot of Koreans were like making their way back. So I was just like oddball out. And so I started feeling a bit lonely within that group, even though there were hundreds of people. So me and another friend who was also the tail end of that group, who's also Korean American, that was trying to be part of this Korean group, started hanging out with the college group. But the college group isn't all college. We're not being weird. They're not all college people. There's also head ends of that college group that are like refusing to leave because they don't want
to give up their status
because they don't want to go to the young adult group. They want to be like the older people there or whatever. And so that head end and that tail end group started becoming quite big. And that group started hanging out, and that's the group that we're part of. That like at its core maybe has like 5-6 members, and broadly probably has like 10 to 20 members. And I think within there, like him and I were both like, this is cringe, but locally public figures. Meaning he was super involved, and like I stood out. And so
did you before you guys even met? Did you know of him?
I would say so.
Yeah,
that's what I remember. So
I actually don't recall.
It's too big. Yeah.
No of in the sense that if we like saw each other, even though we didn't really like hang out yet, we would say like hi, and we would be like, oh, what's up? And there was not like an awkward like, oh, you don't know me. It was I know you know me, and you know I know you. And it was very naturally integrated.
Cool.
And then like a year or two passed. That board game room cafe thing happened, and then I was like, oh, why not? And I'm a very like why not type of person. And so since then, I was like, let's like. Two things. One, New York is a very like symbolic place, and it's very sellable, and we know New York relatively well. And secondly, we started thinking like, how can we leverage our Koreanness and like Korean resources to accomplish this goal? And so in like relevance for like Cambridge, we like used our own Cambridge, and we started looking into like as late as last week the like Korean production companies and like local vendors here who are a lot cheaper than American vendors, for example. But using that know-how to get to them and use their resources to build the board game better. Which I think he mentioned earlier, like he said, oh, like Bryan was good, but if anything, I experienced the opposite of like there's a limitation of my like business talk, and also a lot of these vendors aren't. I wouldn't say they're like white collar like businesses. They're a lot like more blue collar, so they are very like you need to like approach them in a very Korean fashion, and that's something that like is very good at that I couldn't do to talk to these guys.
Yes, that makes sense.
One thing I really love about being in Korea is that there are so many towns that are specialized in some kind of industry. So we actually went to Ulchiro. Ulchiro is known for food, and there's some, the city hall is there. But it's also known for all of the printing shops. So if you actually have to go print something especially with the specialized printing, something like board games, board game cards, they have it all. It's pretty easy to access them, and it's easy for us entrepreneurs to compare options. One time we looked up online, and they asked me for like $2,000, $3,000. Yeah, and we went to local shop, and they only asked for $500.
Wow!
So we actually saved like 1/4 of the price that we would have paid.
And I think that's like the craziest part. Like it was a huge like aha moment for me, where, and you could say in a bad way, you could call it exploitation, but for me, it's more like, now in this globalized state, if you're able to find the pockets of fluency, which, for example, in this business, has a fluency within, like, knowing that Uichiro is this place.
Yes.
Yeah, you could Google it, but like I think there's a level of trust where, like, I know that Uichiro is this place, so I'm going to go with you to go to this place. Once I even get there, number one, if we couldn't speak Korean, there's no way that business, we could like point at things or whatever, but there were so many delicacies that we were far more efficient because we could both speak Korean. But two, I know for a fact, like, when I read the room, there were things that, like, he was like, oh, like, 안녕하세요, gave the business card and, like, called beforehand, spoke in, like, perfect formal tone. Those things definitely made the business better, and their willingness to, like, give us better business. And I'm sure, not because they're bad people, but because that's just how business works. If we were a bit more foreign, they might have been less polite to us, giving us a worse deal, say, oh, like, we would rather just not do this. But here, went very smooth sailing, the follow-ups are easy. And I think that's, like, the beauty of being multicultural lingual.
Makes sense. So, I mean, I feel like it's one thing to like have an idea about something and be like, oh, this would be fun to do, but then another thing to like bring it from 0 to 1 and actually kind of like literally set up like LLCs or things like that, right? And you guys have like taken it to full length, maybe in part because like knows a lot of stuff too, right? Like I think that maybe should be addressed is like I feel like you could easily be like some sort of like cross-border business consultant. I mean, maybe you already do this to some extent between like Korea and the US, and like other people that have had maybe a similar background as you as moving to the States when they're like for high school and then staying there through college, like nowhere near the level of like sophistication or understanding. So like why is that? Explain that to me.
So actually my family is entrepreneur family. So we actually, my parents used to run like business in Korea, so I'm pretty familiar with in Korea. But what I learned from their experience and growing up as their kids was that if you have actually a question, you can actually easily look up on Google. Google has everything pretty much. So from that point, and then after we discussed like how we want to set the business, all that, I actually Googled all the law, like policies and the options that we could take. And then we started from there. So that's why we were able to set up business formally in America, and hopefully we can expand to Korea at some point. That's how I learned it. And it's pretty easy to set up business. I feel like people are intimidated by some legal terms and how they should approach with their business, especially with like setting up their business formally with the government.
Right.
But my advice to them is to look up on Google, go ask friends, or ask me maybe.
Yes.
On advice.
I feel like I have that issue. It's like I'll see like government documents and I'll see like a few words that I don't really know. I'm just like, I don't want to deal with this right now. And like I'm so impatient with that stuff too. Is like it's a problem, but I guess since I have you now, maybe I should use you.
But not to undermine. This is if anything a compliment to like during this process, right? Like I've been part of startups before, and we typically just use lawyers or have them handle it, and have agencies that do it. In fact, there's agencies that literally do what does at absurd prices. Right. Yeah, they ask for equity, they ask for like all these things.
Yes.
His point about like I just have to Google it. It's actually not that hard. I realized that because during this process, I'm sure like worked hard, right? Yeah. But like we would do something that I would think like, oh, with a 7 ending or whatever. The next day, be like, oh, it's done by me. And I'd be like, oh, maybe it's not that hard.
Yeah.
And then I'll be like, oh, like I think we need to like register this IP or license or whatever. And he'd be like, okay, let me look into it. 2 hours later, be like, oh, I think we just do this. I'll be like, oh, okay. And so I don't. It's really that barrier of does my mind allow me to say this is doable,
Yes.
or do I already stop myself at this rank? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because like you partly attribute it to the fact that your parents had like international businesses, right? They did business in the States. But I feel like if you were exact same person in terms of like DNA and like the way that your mind works, I feel like it would be no different, even if you had different parents.
I agree.
Yeah. It's just like, because even when it doesn't come to, let's say, business related stuff, like even the visa stuff, right, is like, you know, a lot more like nuanced, idiosyncratic, random visa stuff than like anybody else I would ever come across, you know?
That whenever like article shows up, like news article shows up, I actually read and and I look up like on like Naver, which is a Korean Google, and then I search like some visa terms, and then they pop up pretty easily.
Why?
I don't know. I like when I have free time, that's what I do.
Yeah.
So that's why. I have a lot of knowledge on that part.
Yeah.
I should have gone to law school. Yeah.
I think you would be a pretty good lawyer. Yes. So the game, the name of the game, the name of the company that you like constructed around it. Share a little bit about it.
Oldport friends. Yes. So
what's the significance of it?
So we actually spent a lot of time in Newport, which is the town in New Jersey, in the Hudson County.
Oh, we live in.
Yeah, we live in. I used to live in. Yeah. But there are a lot of college kids living in the town, and we are older than them. So we were like, oh, we should have called ourselves Oldport, not Newport. And then that's where our company name started from. And we actually look into other options like Oldport Partners or Oldport Bros, all that. And we decided that friends is the term that's somewhat formal and is somewhat informal. So so we decided to go with the Oldport Friends for our company name.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And then the game itself?
Yes.
Rat
it's
Race?
called Rat Race.
Yeah.
A Get There game.
Yeah.
How do you describe the game to people that are approaching it for the first time, but are like board game enthusiasts? Like they know a lot about board games, but like how do you describe what kind of game is it?
So you have to explore New York City, not physically, but on the board game.
Right.
To actually win the game. Actually, Yon is pretty good at this game. Yon won like 2 games, and she was on fire when we played last week as well as a pilot. So you have to get there or get to some point on the board game map to fight with someone else in the game or with the bank. So you basically roll not you, but you have to present one fight card to win the property or landmark. Yep. We could actually call it landmark card. So you take the landmark card if you win over someone else in the game. Yep. And if you collect all the category, like one category, so 4 landmarks in one category, so then you win the game. So it's pretty easy, like simple to learn the game.
And like, what was the like? You said you guys had gone to the board game cafe, like hung out, and then this idea came up. Like, what about the idea? The fact that there was no board game that was like New York City themed, is that what it primarily was?
I think our premise is less on like I don't think like him and I are like brilliant board game builders.
Sure,
we're gonna build the most fun board game ever.
Yeah,
probably not. But there is no real like New York City based game, and I think we're marketing on the idea of like. We know New York well, and New York is a marketable place. There's like Monopoly, but I think if we designed a game that had New York at the core of its DNA, then perhaps the sellability is quite high. If it could be used as like a souvenir for people that want to visit New York or are coming from New York. And the idea is that the multi-label like structure, Oldport Friends is our main LLC, the company that we're building these like social experiences. That's like our broad vision. But Get There is like, we have it trademarked essentially. Get There is like the umbrella board game brand. Let's call it like, it's like the Monopoly, but there's also like Monopoly Simpsons, Monopoly Disney or whatever. Right. And so we're looking to expand that into various cities and do like Get There New York, which is Rat Race, Get There Korea, which we haven't come up with a name yet. And then allow collectors to like collect these differently branded city-based games that are that you could tell by the design and by the nature of the game that who made it. We made it, but whoever made it knows the city well.
So a question on this note, which is like tangential but a little bit unrelated,
Good.
is like you guys had this idea at a board game cafe in New York, right?
In Korea.
Oh, in Korea. Do they have board game cafes in the States
So,
too? That thing?
so they have cafes with board games, but I don't think they have board
They're
game
not like
cafes.
that. Okay. 'Cause
With-
that's like a thing here.
It is. It is.
And what are the games, like the games that they play are all US based games, or are there Korean, like very Korean board games that just Korean people know about? Or
There's both. There's both, but it seems like the American games do take like priority. Or not priority, but people like American games better. There are a couple Korean games. There's also American games that aren't necessarily popular in America, but Koreans like a lot, which I've also noticed. And then, like as a caveat, which I think is interesting to talk about, board game cafes as a business model, which I've thought about, really only work in countries like Korea. And so to like stereotype and let my fellow Americans down, I don't think it would ever work in America for multiple reasons. One, like rent is too high, especially in a place like New York.
Yep.
I don't think board game cafes would work in like small suburban towns because there's not enough people. When we go to board game cafes, it's full. Like there's people all the time. But in America, I think it would only be happening in New York or like LA. But even then, rent is too high. Secondly, I'm just gonna say it. The average quality of a Korean is definitely higher than the average quality of American in terms of like cleanliness, like ability to take care of things and whatnot. And so I don't think I would ever trust Americans to keep the board games at the quality that they are. In Korea, if you go to these board game cafes, the board games are spotless. Like there's not even a dent in them. No way that's happening in America. And probably the third thing is, I think Americans, there's a lot more things to do outside. Like people play sports, people play pickleball, people go rowing, they go hiking or whatever. Koreans, I think, are limited to a lot of internal things.
Yeah.
But in addition, New York, it's not the case, but in the States, there's a lot of like house parties and houses are big enough for you to host people. In Korea, a lot of times houses are not big enough for you to host people. So even to play a board game, you need to come to maybe even a place like this to play it. So the business model itself, I think, is only relevant for Korea.
So maybe related to this topic of like differences between, or did you have something that you wanted to add?
I was gonna say the room escape cafe are examples to that, like indoor, and it provides like place together for people, and they get to spend like 1 or 2 hours. They get to actually we use it 시간을 녹이다 term. It literally means to melt the time. And so they get to spend times with their families or friends indoor. So that's why board game cafes and room escape cafes are pretty popular in Korea.
Makes sense. The game itself, like how far along is it with the? Because I think when I first saw it or played the game, it was like the game was like thought through, but it was like still very early stages where you hadn't like printed anything out for the most part. But now you have like an actual physical board, right? A lot of the I guess like thought process behind it is more fleshed out. Like is it available for people to buy and like use, or like where are you guys at in the timeline right now?
So we are actually building a wait list. We call it rate.
Like a
Red list, wait
list.
website.
Yeah.
So if you're interested, we're gonna soon publish the website, so you can put your name down there, and then we're gonna email you once the game is available for purchase.
But in terms of like production / design, we're there in terms of like ideation. But I think it's one of those things where him and I are very like uptight about making it right. And last week, 2 days ago, was the first time that we've like really played the game with a full set of 5 people. And you don't really know what a game feels like until you actually play it. Because until now, we've like used Zoom to like simulate it. And so I think coming off that, we recognize too, like one, we haven't done the whole New York thing enough, because our whole selling point is New York.
Yeah.
But the one of the big feedback was like, this doesn't feel like a New York game, it just feels like a game that happens to be in New York. And so I think there's a bit of the branding side that we still have to work on. And then the game itself, it's not fun. People that play it do have fun. But 2 things. One, the people that we simulated with are typically all friends already.
Yes.
So we can't differentiate between the game being fun and the group being fun. And then secondly, there are some like frustrating points because we're obviously first-time board game builders.
Right.
So I would say we're probably we're still probably a couple months out, in my opinion, in terms of like fully completing the game, but infinitely farther than where we were before.
Have you guys done like, it seems like partly this is just a learning experiment project,
100%.
right? Is like even going through the exercise of bringing something from zero to production is like valuable in and of itself for like future projects. But like in terms of tracking other board games that have become successful, like do you know a lot about like what works, what doesn't? Is it like kind of luck based? Is it a lot of like marketing heavy? Like ones that phase in and phase out? Because I personally don't, I'm not a huge board game person, but like my older brother and my siblings are, like they're obsessed with board games, and like Settlers of Catan is like something huge, right? Like what are the things that you guys feel make but like the difference between one that takes off and one that can't find any
the only thing that I would speak on, and then I'll let speak about like crowdfunding and stuff, but it seems like it's mostly word of mouth. Like I don't think I've ever seen an ad for a board game and go, I really want to play that board game. It's most like I sit at a cafe or I go to someone's house. Yeah. They're like, oh, I haven't played this game before. Yeah. And it's super fun. Then I'm going to go buy it. And secondly, board games have this like sellability issue or upselling issue where once you buy Catan once, other than extensions, I'm not going to buy a board game again. Yes. Right. And so I think in terms of like revenue perspective, it's a relatively hard market to go into. But knows a bit better. There are these like crowdfunding sites which then build like a community. Makes sense. I think is the way to go.
Also, believe it or not, there are a lot of influencers who are specialized in board games. So those influencers only cover board games. You only cover like Korean
diaspora.
Diaspora content. Yes, they only cover board games, and some of them are actually Korean. So it's pretty interesting to see that there are some market who are especially in the board games industry.
That makes sense. Maybe like moving off that, just like career stuff in general, like because we haven't talked about like your crypto stuff, like and your like I guess business, let's say business aspirations. You're going back to the States, right? So this is kind of like a fun side project for you guys both, right? But in terms of like career aspirations, how much certainty you have over that, and also like where I guess you have a much longer tenured because you didn't go to military service and you're a little bit older than right? Can you share a little bit of career-wise how you've thought through things and what experiences you've had?
I laugh at the word certainty because my career is not very certain. And everyone will understand it soon. What I mean. So I started in probably the most certain industry. I started in banking, right, with high certainty. And I worked in M&A after college. I got lucky. I happened to go to school that was like highly a target school. And so I did M&A, and then I got burnt out, didn't like it. And then I worked at a pretty large scale startup, I don't even call it a startup, like big tech company called Cloud Kitchens. It's Uber, Travis Kalanick's new company. And they do ghost kitchens and virtual brands. I won't really go into it, but it's a food delivery related business.
It's still active now, right?
And that's kind of where I was like, okay, I need to go probably into the startup scene. My family's also all entrepreneurs, so I think I was already in that mindset, but leaving banking, I was like, this is what I need to do. And then I met guys there that are far smarter than I am, and they were like, yo, like we're going to start this NFT crypto marketplace thing. I want you to join us. And so 6 of us started that company. And then that's kind of like devolved into, now we're only 4. And at our height, we had like 11, now we have 4. And we've made kind of a name for ourselves in the crypto industry. I've made it for myself. And so right now we're building, I can't give too much away. One, because it's not really built out yet fully, but 2, confidential reason. But essentially we're building a, what they call like a TradFi platform, so traditional finance, but using tokenized assets. So like in layman's terms, like blockchain enabled exchange for crypto.
There are other competing people doing stuff like that, right?
Tons. But the thing that I like, not to be annoying, but the thing that we're doing specifically that I can't really speak on, it is not really available now. Gotcha. We're actually trying to figure out the legality and like availability for it. But the thing that we're like envisioning right now is actually not available. And then on a personal point, I want to call it like crypto influencer because I hate those terms. But throughout the industry, like because this industry is quite young. Imagine like if like finance, the world of finance, which I would say has lasted hundreds of years, but at its core probably a century or so. If finance was, the entirety of finance happened in 4 years, or if you believe in like Bitcoin 2011 or whatever, 10 years, then obviously having been in the industry full time for 4 years, it's quite significant. It's like being like, I'm not Warren Buffett, but like the same level of years within that, because I've just simply been around. I have definitely made like a personal name for myself. So in that, like I'm, for example, by the time this comes out, it'll probably be announced for a blockchain conference. Like I'm emceeing or like moderating an entire day there, and so I do things like one-off things like that as well for my career. But the reason I laughed is crypto industry might be gone tomorrow, so who knows?
Okay, makes sense. I'll ask you more questions, but please share a little bit about how you're thinking about.
So as I said, I majored in sports management. So I did. I worked for New York Mets for 1 year, and then I was intern, and then there was a company that I worked for as an intern for their customer success department. So all of my career trajectory was based on baseball, and then I think the reason why I know so much of the legality of visa / all the business is because that I'm dealing with all the visa delay issues. So that's why, so I'm struggling with that. So that's why I'm like pretty proficient with the legal terms.
Yes.
Actually, I had spoken the previous question that we talked about. But I'm sure that I'll be back in the sports industry with Oldport friends. Background to it as well. So I'm sure that when I go back to America, if there is any job interview, I can talk about my entrepreneurship as the co-founder of Oldport Friends.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you were in undergrad, like in terms of what you were thinking would be like the ideal job opportunity for you. Was there something specific you had in mind, or is more so like open-ended of like, I'm passionate about sports, I like data analytics, I love baseball, I'm just gonna pursue this route and see what opportunities arise? Like, was it more open-ended, or was there something specific?
Yes, actually I was pretty open-ended career opportunity for me. So I actually applied for an internship at a company called Airmark, which is the outsourcing company that New York Mets partners with for their concessions and for retail business in their venue, which is Citi Field. So that's where I started my career. And then I didn't really see myself doing retail business, but it was because it was on baseball field. And I was pretty familiar with Citi Field and baseball industry. That's why I took that job. So I feel like my career is still open-ended in terms of where I'm heading towards. But I'm sure that it'll be somewhat related to baseball industry because I'm so passionate about my sport and my career in baseball. And I'm sure that baseball can make this world a better place. I know it's pretty catchy term. It's pretty cliche, but I actually believe in that statement.
How, when it comes to baseball and following different leagues, are you mostly just following MLB, or do you also follow KBO as well? How does the Korean league, what's its reputation globally, compared to the league in Japan, or I don't even know if other leagues exist? Or what's your point of view, and what's the world's point of view?
So actually, Korea took some big losses, big L's during the international tournaments. Past few years. There is WBC coming up next year actually. So hoping that Korea can win the championship another time. But Korean national team needs some work done. I'll be brutally honest with that. I think 10 teams in KBO is quite large, even though high school baseball market is pretty relatively small. When you go to Japan, there are a lot of high school leagues, and it's pretty competitive, and it gets national attention. Whereas Korea, yes, there is high school league, and there's a lot of companies actually started to host a lot of high school leagues. I know SSG does that. But there are more tasks to be done to improve the league itself. There's reason why we the Korean league limit the international players to 3 players to make the room for Korean players, but Korean players need to grow up more.
Wait, what is that?
So the KBO limits each team with the number of like international players that can play on the team.
And did they do that in other leagues as well? Like in the NBA? Like
in MLB, no.
No. But I'm talking about in Korea, like their soccer league or their basketball league.
Yes.
They do that
yes,
as well.
So it's called 외국인 선수, which really translates to foreign players.
There's caps.
There are caps, yes. So for KBO, they are limited to 3 players, and pitchers. In terms of pitchers, they are only limited to 2 players. So
It's like actually no. I should say.
No, say what you're gonna say, please. No, you don't want to say.
yeah. So again, I'm very honest with this, but there are some rooms to grow for Korean national team in terms of baseball.
So like when it comes to Inho and his like good match between his interests and maybe like also personality, I feel like, and like the career track that you're pursuing. Obviously, there's a bunch of other stuff that I think you could probably do quite well in as well. For you, like I think you mentioned this before. It seems like there's a really good like personality arbitrage in the crypto space, right? And was that intentionally so going in, or did you just discovered that on its own? And also like you've been doing some like social media stuff before. That was before the crypto stuff, or like can you explain why you started doing that too?
I think it's actually the same question.
Mic closer. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. It's the same question.
Yeah.
And so again, my like whole life theme is like why not, right? I'm not a really big why guy. I'm just a why not, right? And so there's no plan. I assure you, there's never been a plan. I've never lived by a plan. But I think as you guys can tell, I'm very like not just extroverted, but I love talking.
Yeah.
If I could have a job that paid me blank amount, it'd be this. I would do this all day, every day. As long as my voice permits me. I'd podcast 24/7. But to Tiger's point, when I was in banking, hated my life, and I asked my friends like, "Yo, like, there's nothing I can do to make myself happy," and they were like, "In the pockets of free time that you have, you should just make like content." And back then, content was not where it's at right now. This is like 2019. Content was still there, but it was like barely starting in terms of like raw content. Like there wasn't that much podcasting. There wasn't like in your face, like what's up everybody on TikTok. It's very like sophisticated content that was doing well. Like on YouTube, it was like Smosh and like the start of Mr. Beast. Like these things that were like very well curated that was doing well and barely started this raw content. So even though I wasn't overly strategizing, I was thinking like there's definitely a gap. I think I'm very good at like arbitraging. There's a gap of like people that want to come into finance and banking specifically, but on YouTube and stuff, a lot of that content is like sophisticated old dudes talking about like banking terms and how cool banking is. And in my thought, like Tiger probably also knows, like banking is not that cool. Like internally, it's just like you're a corporate like worker or whatever. And so I knew, actually I'll say this like very confidently, I knew that this was going to work because the audience that wanted what I was about to make is definitely larger than the audience that was watching what had already been made. And so I put on a hoodie. I was going to be like your next door older brother telling you into the like iPhone film camera, yo, like banking sucks, but like this is how you can get into it. And so starting like day one, I hit like a couple thousand views. I made YouTube like paid partner in 2 months, and like there was definitely not anymore, but there was a period of time for a year or so where like different universities were using my content as like their curriculum. Banking club and like NYU or whatever. Every time I visit New York, like, people would recognize me in the streets. Not anymore. And so like I hit that like curve, and then that I think kickstarted my like ideation of like, oh, like one, I think I'm kind of good at this, and two, there's an opportunity here, and then that allowed me to come full circle. Do two things. One, like the guys that wanted to start the crypto thing basically recognized they're like, okay, we're very good at like products and like being nerdy or whatever, but we need someone cool or like someone to like understand the market because crypto is a very like internet culture thing. Yeah. And so one, but two, that put me on the map in terms of like there's a lot of like influencers that I know personally. There's influencer VCs actually that like invest into micro influencers. Yep. And one of those guys told me, they're like, yo, like you're very Korean American fluent, and Korea is a very hot thing right now, and so you should start making Korean content. But cover like news, not like cringy skits or whatever. No offense, but like deliver news quickly. And I started recognizing like, yo, like I can be faster than the news itself because all I need to do is find Korean news and then immediately like translate it in my head and then just deliver it. And I don't write scripts or anything. I just go off on my own. And so that also took off immediately. I remember my first ever Korean news video hit like 4 million views that day. And I was like, oh wow, this is gonna work. So I just started cranking those out. And so in short, I think like I'm more nature versus nurture, frankly. I think like I probably have the DNA to carry out what I need to do, and I think that loosely aligns with my career currently.
Fascinating. And as it relates to like social media stuff in general, you are most active on like which platforms, and you still are actively covering like Korean related content? Is that most of what you're doing?
Yeah, I would say like my YouTube is done. YouTube I do for fun, like purely for fun. TikTok and Instagram, I post the same thing every time. So I post on TikTok, the video gives me an output, and then I upload that to Instagram. And yeah, I mean, while I've been in Korea, I've been kind of lazy. But even within Korea, I would say my Instagram is very consistent in terms of virality, and my TikTok is like one every other time, like it really takes off. But that's like unified across all influencers.
Is there's some synergy between like the Korean content that you're doing and also like the crypto stuff that you're doing, or you view those as pretty separate things, like separate hobbies?
I actually find it there's definitely synergy, simply because there's like a information asymmetry and networking effect, meaning like within crypto, there's rare but existing occurrences where people are like, oh, I've seen Bryan on TikTok, and people have a very poor pulse in general of how actually influential or how actually powerful someone is. Meaning, because they've seen, I have a lot of friends who have seen my videos on their feed.
Yes.
Some of them go really like viral.
Yep.
They think I'm far more influential than I actually am. Because no one really like looks at the followers,
right,
like sees the various history. They just know that Bryan is a guy that's made millions of views on a platform. And that happens in crypto a lot because these guys are a lot of times like internet savvy people that are on the internet all the time. So within the crypto world, obviously there's like real celebrities, but there's also like a niche where people that, because I'm recognizable to a certain degree, that definitely helps me in my career.
That makes sense. Yeah, it feels like crypto is like the space to arbitrage have a personable individual
100%.
that can also communicate and articulate themselves well.
100%.
Right? I think like maybe as you go more into like quant finance in general, that tends to happen.
I agree.
You know? One of the questions that I wanted to ask both of you about, like for you is. Both of you met each other at like within the context of like Korean church environment, right? Both of you said you had like when you were in the States, education experiences where there weren't many Korean people around you, right? Like was that when there weren't many Korean people around you when you were in high school, like you were still part of a Korean community at that time?
Yes, we actually had like group of international kids, not in my grade, but in other grades, especially Korean community. So I was always part of that Korean community, but in terms of the number of Korean community, like how many people there are in the group are quite different. So when I was in California, there were only like 20 Korean international kids, whereas I went to NYU and then there were like a few thousands of Korean international students there.
Yes.
So yes, I was definitely always definitely part of a Korean community wherever I go. So my parents my family used to live in Netherlands.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And then in Netherlands, there are actually Korean community, even though it's really small, but there's Korean church, but there's Korean community. There's no H Mart, which is like the Korean market.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is that it's pretty accessible for Koreans to find Korean community wherever they go.
Yep.
So that's my...
How long were your parents in Netherlands for, and what were they doing there? Are you able to say?
Yeah. So my father used to work for a company in Netherlands. He used to work in the Korean company, and then he found a new job there. So he moved on to position in the Netherlands. They used to live there for 3-4 years, and then I feel like you can do another Korean like K bridge event in Netherlands.
That would be
I can help
sweet.
you.
That would be pretty sweet. Okay.
So Yeah, I was always part of Korean community. Yeah.
That's like so deeply rooted as part of your identity that like you will always be part of some Korean community. Is that your expectation? Unless you were to move to some country for some reason where there were like no Korean people.
I will say yes, because even though I have no problem with like speaking English, but it's just Korean thing that I sometimes want to use my Korean skills to describe my emotions and what I really truly feel about. So when I actually talk to Bryan, we talk in English when we talk about business stuff. We use Kakao Talk to like chat about our shipping options yesterday, but 100% was in English. But when I like actually say something personally, or if I have like personal questions that I really want to ask Bryan or our friend group, I use Korean. Because in the business level, my English is okay, but I don't feel like difficult when I like describe my emotions in English, but I prefer Korean. So that's why I will find Korean community wherever I go. At least I will try. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Do you have anything like that where it's like when you're explaining something in what you prefer one language over the other, just in terms of the content, not like your ability to articulate, because that's one thing, right? It's like if you get into areas where it's like, I don't know how to articulate this, but just in terms of what you feel more comfortable about.
I'm actually reflecting. I'll start here. Because of my personality, there are moments, I think maybe you guys can empathize. There's times I just want to small talk. Like I just want to like chat. Koreans are not very good at small talking, and I don't think the language itself is not attributed to small talking. My dad said something recently, and it's such a wise quote. I want my dad to get credit. He basically said, people think that in English there's no formal tone, right? So in Korean there's formal tone and informal tone. In Spanish there's usted and there's tu. And so a lot of people think that English is a rude language. My dad actually, he thinks that English by default is actually a formal tone language. And so the way to think about it is it's not that an adult or a kid is speaking to an adult in a rude way. The adult is actually speaking to the kid in a formal way. And so that actually allows, not to get too complicated, that allows everyone to speak to everyone without feeling a barrier based on age, formality, or whatever, because everyone is speaking to each other in a weird way, in a nice way. So when I say like you, I don't in a Korean way or a Spanish way, I'm not saying du or no. It really means like, hey, like let's speak to each other. And I think that allows for a wider conversation across everyone. Where in Korean, I think there's a limit to that, because there's definitely phrases, words, contexts that are limited to certain age groups or certain age dynamics. That doesn't allow you to have the same conversation perhaps with your grandparents or people at work or adults. Whereas in English, I'm generalizing, but that allows you to have like varying conversations. So I would almost say like, no duh. I think I'm definitely far more expressive in English now that I think about it. And there's probably frustration points within Korean that I'm like, damn, like I'm probably, it's not that I lack the words, it's more of like, I'm probably not conveying exactly the feeling that I'm conveying, or over conveying by using stronger words that I probably don't mean.
Yes. Yeah, on the point of, I mean, I think that's why I like speaking in English is like, even with the podcast, I wasn't doing Korea-related podcast stuff before I came to Korea, but I would like reach out to like CEOs of startups, right? Some of them are like they raise big rounds and they're like well known within specific communities, and your ability to just like jump on a call with them and just have like what feels like a pretty normal conversational interaction. Like maybe they'll have some ego or some pride, but like for the most part, you can converse with them openly. Is like not the same really here in Korea, right? You can't do that. And I do think a lot of it is baked into the language. And also if you think about like the degree to which they're, I don't know, this is from an outsider's perspective, but the divisiveness in general between communities within Korea, both generationally, across genders, across people of like different industries and backgrounds, it just feels like there's a lot of that, you know? For you and your like relationship with Korean communities in general, because There was a point at which you weren't involved with any like even Korean American community.
Yeah, I would say so in Southern California, tons of Korean Americans always had them.
Yeah.
But when I went to school or university, there was no one. I had one Korean Canadian friend who I was very close to, but that friend was part of a friend group which was 90% white American. There was no Korean church there. There was no Korean culture. I would go back during breaks and kind of go back into the church back at home, but I would say for 4 years, you had nothing.
Wow. And why, like, even when you went to New York, like, I guess you just accepted that that's part of an identity that you wanted to express, or you feel comfortable around those people, or like, why even look for that, right? Like, even within a faith-based context, like, you just go to a regular multicultural church with maybe some Koreans, but it's not like a Korean church.
I could even went to a white church and just retain my. I think I did it because genuinely for fun. Like, so here's the thing. When I went to Chicago, I went to a Korean church for the first time, and just because someone told me to go there. And 6 months after COVID hit, so the church shut down for some time being. But those 6 months, it was just so fun. I think interacting with Koreans felt like new to me, and it's something that I've never experienced before. And as an extrovert, it felt fun. But even more so, as like an attention-seeking person, being the like American person in a Korean group is super fun. Especially because like, I'll say another controversial thing, because America is obviously the main culture in America and like globally, but especially with America, obviously Americans are the mainstream. And it's this weird hodgepodge reverse where you're in a community that's part of a community, but the community that you're directly part of is a minority community within a majority community, and you're a majority person going into that minority community. So you don't, at any point, maybe, I mean, they could be internally could be thinking like, "Well, this guy's such a loser," but I've never felt that in a Korean community. I just feel like I am someone major being in a minor place, and that's something that like I'll openly say I am definitely like taking advantage of. So for example, like if we like go to a restaurant, even now, and in New York, and they ask me to order because my English is like the most fluent or whatever. Or when I do certain things like be loud or talk to the Uber driver, they're like, "Oh, like Brian's so American." And I think like I enjoy those moments.
Yes, that makes sense. I mean, even personality-wise, like you're very much like I know other Korean Americans born and raised in the States, and in terms of like their personality, they don't feel as American.
No,
you know.
No.
So that's a pretty big asset. You know. You are dating a Korean girl.
Yes.
Right. Was that part of the plan as well? Like, just out of curiosity, like.
There's never been a plan.
Yes, there's never been a plan. Yes.
I do think the more interesting thing to talk about is she's an odd case. I think we could be an entire podcast on her alone, but she's very fluent in English. Like to the point where on that scale from 0 to 10, even though she's like Korean born and raised, went to high school here, even tried like college admissions here, I would say if she really wanted to try, she could probably last relatively long on the reverse scale of trying to sound like she's at least a Korean American. I'm sure there's things people could pick up on, but there's no accent, there's no like diction issues, nothing. And so I think that was essential and established in the relationship. And I would say like if there was a person within that church that I found attractive or whatever, but had a lower level of fluency in English, I probably couldn't like end up marrying her, which I am now.
That makes sense. You know, with you, you're going to be going back to the States. At least that's the plan.
Something, yes.
Right. Like from a personability standpoint, is like even communication wise, like that was really important for him. Is like somebody that could speak English basically fluently. Does the English part even matter for you? Like, will you just date like other Korean people for the most part?
I will say no, but what I'm thinking is that my future partner should be at least like understand Korean language and culture at least, because because the reason is
what did Brian say?
Sorry, how about English?
Oh, how about English? Yeah.
Like the capability.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, because my plan is to live in America at least for a few years. Yes, English matters, but it's not a requirement. Like as we talked about, there are a lot of Korean communities in America, so you don't really have to speak fluent English to live out your life in America, especially like metropolitan cities like LA and New York City. There are K-towns, and 32nd Street is all about Korean. Like you can live in America without using a single word in English.
Yes.
And there are Korean CPAs, there's Korean lawyers if you need them. So it's pretty easy to live in America without speaking a single word in English.
Is Korean a requirement?
I would say yes.
Yeah. That makes sense. Just based on what you said before about like how you prefer to express
like interact with
Yes.
in my personal level.
Last thing is, let's see. Oh, we gotta wrap up. All right, we'll wrap up. I was gonna ask you maybe just to say a quick thing about like Korean churches in general, or just like church in general, has both been a pretty big impact on your guys' life, right? That's always been the case from like your upbringing until now, or like what can you share a little bit about your faith?
So Korean churches focus on the value of community. They always bring people to build communities, and they help build communities among congregations. So it's a huge deal for me. I'm an extrovert, so it's I always love to meet new people and bring them to church, or meet new people in church to build new community in church. Of course, we have to seek the Lord first before meeting people. But yeah, that's the value that I learned from the Korean church, and that's the value that actually other international communities should learn from Korean church, how to build communities within foreign lands or within the country they belong in.
Good answer. And even based on the ski trip that we had, Inho is somebody you want part of your group for sure, right? In terms of being incredibly hospitable and from a logistical planning. You said you're not a planner, right? He is the planner. Yes. He's the epitome of a perfect planner. So yeah, Bryan, what about you?
I'll close off by saying that's why I think this is not even to like kiss ass to Tiger, but like extrovert or not, I think everyone needs a space to be themselves, and to be themselves, I think you need, ironically, people also like themselves. The like Venn diagram has to overlap. I'm all for diversity. I think like it's fine, but you do need a space where you have people like you, so that you can empathize or sympathize based on what you're going through. And I think the Korean church allows Koreans to have that. Like for me, again, as I mentioned before, the Korean church, Lord first, is more for fun. Like I'm not going there because I'm like struggling and I need people to listen to what I'm struggling about. There are moments like that, but I would say the majority of our church's experience is very different from mine. I'm not having visa issues. I'm not having, I don't miss my family in Korea or whatever because they're here. The same way, I think like with Cambridge and like providing this platform, a virtual church in a sense, for people that have similar like diaspora problems or experiences, I think is like a very big market fit, because that population is only going to grow, in my opinion. Political statement, but I think it's only going to grow, and I think like that is what people like deep down seek. And to end on a corny like Oldport friends note, like our friend group on Monday or on Sunday, we talked about how ultimately like we want to all live near each other, and I think it builds on the same idea. Where we were talking about how like what is the point of life outside of Jesus Christ to enjoy or whatever if it isn't near the people that we like. And I think being able to grab that somehow is quite important.
Yeah, one of the metrics, or at least one data point that I take very seriously is like what are the people around you, what do they say about you, and also what types of people tend to gravitate towards you. And I feel like it's been pretty cool to see like your group is like pretty solid people, and like even though I've only had like a few interactions with you guys through like Jun, I'm very grateful I have. And I'm grateful you guys were willing to do the pod.
Oh yeah.
So looking forward to more collaboration opportunities and all that fun stuff.
Shout out Cambridge.